I have tried to cut the introductions down as much as I can, but I will be doing the introductions. My name is Talia Vrachopoulos. I am a full professor here of art history at John Jay College, as is my colleague here, Dr. Andreopoulos. And I am a curator besides being a professor here at John Jay. I specialize in Asian art and have had occasion to curate many shows with Asian art and particularly Korean art, upon which I'm writing a book at the moment. Enough about myself. This is, next to me right here is, I will do only the introductions because the subject will be introduced to you by my co-curator, Dr. Jung-Shil Lee, who is intimately familiar with this topic. So this is, as I said before, George Andreopoulos, who is Professor of Political Science and Director of the Center for International Human Rights at John Jay College. Before coming to CUNY, Professor Andreopoulos taught for several years at Yale University, where he was also the founding associate director of the Orville Schell Center for International Human Rights. He holds a PhD and a law degree from Cambridge, and tonight his topic will be the moral and legal vocabulary of collateral damage. This next to him is Professor Bonnie Oh. Professor Bonnie Oh is a retired distinguished professor of Korean studies at Georgetown University and received her doctorate from the University of Chicago. She has published widely on the Northeast Asia regions. She serves on the boards of the Washington Coalition for Comfort Women Issues. She just published her book, Murder in the Palace, in 1916. Her topic tonight will be collateral damage again. The person next to her is Professor Laura Barbaran Reynades, who is an assistant professor of English literature at Bronx Community College of CUNY. She has published an award-winning article on feminism, globalization, and trafficking, and a book called Sex Trafficking in Post-Colonial Literature, Transnational Narratives from Joyce to Boiano. And since 2014, serves as an advisory board member of the nonprofit organization Crossing Points Arts, bringing the arts to survivors of human trafficking. Her topic tonight will be the ethics of representing sexual violence. And next to her is Professor Tomomi Imoto. Tomomi Imoto is an adjunct assistant professor of anthropology at Queens College of the City University of New York and earned her PhD in cultural anthropology at Southern Illinois University. Dr. Imoto teaches gender and violence in East Asia at the Holocaust Center at Queensborough Community College. Her writings focus on the interrelationship of power, culture, and history as exemplified by her article, Performing Alterity, Post-Colonial Genesis of Borderland Identity in Japan, and a forthcoming edited volume, Borders Beyond States in Asia, Power, Identity, and History of Borders. Quite accomplished, our speakers tonight. Her topic is remembering, performing, and historicizing the past in post-colonial Japan and Korea. And finally, my co-moderator and co-curator, Dr. Jung-Shil Lee, who is an art historian, curator, and professor at Washington University, Virginia, and the president of the Washington Coalition for Comfort Women Issues. She has organized numerous academic conferences and exhibitions. She received her PhD in art history from the University of Maryland with a focus on the meaning of the public memorial as healing process. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce her topic tonight, which is the introduction of our talk tonight, which is on wartime trauma, and Dr. Jung-Shil Lee.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Jung-Shil Lee, as known as Julie. for your convenience, I create this English name, so you can call me as Julie. And I would like to thank to all of you to come here ready to listen to the ideas of these distinguished speakers. It is a Monday evening, and it is not always very easy to come Monday evening. We are here today because we all know that this is a very important issue, a recurrent problem that is barely scratched so far. We ask difficult questions and we try to find the potential answers and possible solutions. This panel presents how and why women and children, the most vulnerable, were sexually assaulted and violated in the course of war, and even now, in the times of peace and ordinary days. The plight of a woman who suffered during time of a conflict continued in the aftermath of a war, not only because of the enormous psychological and emotional trauma, but also the social and cultural stigma attached to their horrendous experiences. The main goal of today's symposium is to discuss the importance of human rights and women's rights, to commemorate and heal the trauma of wartime victims. The exhibition and symposium Collateral Damage especially focuses on comfort women who were sexually enslaved during the World War II by Japanese military. They are all in their late 80s or 90s, passing away one by one, and few survivors leave without any official apology or legal reparation, and Germany did decades ago. We, WCCW, will make sure that these women occupy a prominent place in the annals of history and let the world know their presence and the past in educational purposes. The symposium will discuss diverse approaches and interpretations of wartime atrocities such as recurrent human rights violations and literary narratives and presentation of sexual violence, the post-colonial discourses, and historical readings of geopolitics. The first speaker is George Andropoulos. I'm not sure if this is the right pronunciation.
Okay.
Andropoulos. And he will review the issues of terms in legal text, the terms of collateral damage in legal text and public pronouncements, and in access the meaning and the relevancy in contemporary discourses. So without further ado, let's welcome the Professor George Andropoulos.
Thank you very much. I don't have many minutes for my remarks, so I'm going to say a few things, and then obviously I would welcome any questions that merit further clarification or explanation of what I'm about to say. But first of all, I would like to begin by thanking Julie and Thalia for undertaking this initiative to organize this very important exhibition in this critical issue area. And I also want to thank the Washington Coalition for Comfort Women Issues for sponsoring it. The term that we're using is collateral damage, and this is a term that I have been struggling for several decades, because there is a penumbra, a kind of a shadow of legitimacy that is surrounding this concept. And what do I mean by that is that it is a concept that is included in legal texts, but it is a concept that has an era. I mean, it has a kind of a smell of something not very good. Okay? That's something that we should accept, but something that should make us feel both morally as well as legally uncomfortable. Because basically what it does, it permits civilian casualties when they are incidental to an attack on a legitimate military target. But there are other problems with this. But let me start first of all with a standard understanding of collateral damage. And the rule prohibits indiscriminate attacks. And by indiscriminate attacks, at least in legal text, we refer to attacks that are not directed against combatants or military objectives, or they are attacks that are unable to distinguish between military personnel, combatants, and civilians, or military objectives and civilian objects, and also requires proportionality in attack. What this means is that it prohibits the launching of an attack which may be expected to cause incidental loss of civilian life or injury to civilians, which would be excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated. So basically, and what is interesting, I would like to say a couple more words about this term incidental in the sense of casual or inadvertent. On the one hand, this kind of concept allows you to say, well, maybe you'll be responsible for civilian deaths, even if they are not the result, these deaths, of a direct military attack. But this opening is at the same time conditioned by the idea that it must be a disproportionate, must be excessive in relation to the concrete military advantage that would be anticipated. Now, as you can imagine, it has been subjected, the term, to many criticisms. One of them, how do you weigh expected civilian casualties against concrete and direct military advantage? How do you assess excessive civilian damage? Whether assessment of military advantage should be related to one attack, a series of attacks, or a whole campaign. But it is another more serious problem, as far as I'm concerned. Not that these are not serious problems, of course, but let's discuss, which poses serious moral as well as practical questions. If one were to proceed with such an assessment, whether ex ante or ex post, that is, before the attack you do an assessment or after the attack, you need to have certain figures on, or estimates on civilian war-related casualties. Now, the interesting question here is who counts as a civilian casualty? Because governments tend to keep statistics on military deaths, but seldom have comprehensive civilian death statistics. And even if they do, like for example in the United States, the civilian death statistics do need civilians that work for the Department of Defense. Clearly, this has not been a priority concern, and there are plausible explanations of why it has not been a priority concern. Now, different compilations of data by different studies, including by international organizations, have used different criteria as to who should count as a civilian to be included in the statistics. A recent survey has identified several categories that have appeared in various compilations. In addition, of course, to those that are killed as a result of the direct effect of war, you include those that are injured, those dying whether during or after the war as a result of indirect effect of disease, malnutrition, and so on and so forth, those victimized by one-sided violence during war, let's say campaigns that relate to crimes against humanity, victims of rape or other forms of sexual violence, and those affected by war, refugees and internally displaced people. Some of these categories that I just mentioned are very pertinent to today's discussion. For a long time, they have remained hidden in conversations about responsibility in war and in legal texts. Sexual violence, and by here, which includes acts like rape, sexual mutilation, sexual humiliation, forced prostitution, forced pregnancy, among other things, is a good example. In the Geneva Convention, sexual violence is not designated as a grave breach. That is a very, very serious offense for which you must embark on some kind of a universal jurisdiction, that is either you prosecute the person or you extradite them somewhere else. An argument has been made that it fits under other categories of grave breaches, such as willfully causing great suffering or serious injury to body or health, or put it under the label of torture or inhuman treatment. And the implication, another of course problem, is that the Geneva Convention characterized rape and other forms of sexual violence as attacks wherever they mention, and they don't consider it, as I say, as grave breaches. They consider them as attacks against the honor of women. This implication, the implication here being that honor is something lent to women by men, and that a raped woman is dishonored. And they have not figured until recently in discussions about civilian damage, excessive or otherwise, in the context of military operations. And the idea, for example, of talking about sexual violence as a violation of bodily integrity rights was very late coming into the international discourse. While the atrocities committed during the war in the former Yugoslavia may have placed this issue firmly on the international agenda, I would argue that it was the belated recognition of the crimes committed during World War II against thousands of Asian women and girls that have marked an important turning point. And of course, nowadays the International Criminal Court statute is a step in the right direction that has expressed provisions on sexual violence, both under war crimes as well as crimes against humanity. But we had to wait a long time for this. So how do we bring these stories forward? How do we give them legal standing? Well, of course, as I say, this is a long and difficult question, and there are clearly no magic bullets here. However, I would argue that what the experience of comfort women and those of other victimized groups have taught us is the importance to be able to be heard, to register one's voice as a first step. So in this vein, I would like to mention an interesting initiative, and this initiative is coming in an era of proliferating platforms in domestic, regional, and international level in which these things can be discussed. It is an initiative by the Every Casualty Program, which is a non-governmental organization which is seeking support for a charter for the recognition of every casualty of armed violence. This charter was launched several years ago by the Oxford Research Group, which is a think tank that tries to advance a human security-related approach to critical international and transnational security challenges. And it calls upon states to ensure that every direct casualty of armed violence is properly recorded, correctly identified, and publicly acknowledged. The argument behind this effort is to enable for a more timely, transparent, reliable, and comprehensive monitoring of all forms of armed violence, and also hopefully facilitate an effort to bring states and other parties in non-violent situations. Remember, armed violence, not war, because you need to include a lot of the atrocities that happen against civilians in situations of internal conflicts that traditionally have not registered in war casualties. While at this stage it focuses only on deaths, this kind of effort, there is no reason why it cannot expand in the future to cover all war-related casualties, so as to, and I quote here from their own ambitious statement, provide a human face to the many nameless, hidden, and often distant victims of armed violence. The reason that we can discuss these issues today and demand accountability for these atrocities, irrespective, of course, of our ability to ensure accountability in many situations, is because certain brave individuals and groups, like among those whose stories you are going to hear from other speakers, simply refused to remain silent. Thank you.
An adjunct international expert in human rights issues, and you help us to understand the perimeters and the meanings of collateral damage conduct. Let me explain a little bit about structures of our symposium. After 4 speakers' short presentation, it's not going to go more than 10 minutes, and then we will lead to the discussions and Q&A session. Okay, so please keep that in mind, the speakers, less than like 8 to 10 minutes. The second speaker will be Professor Bonnie Oh, and her presentation will explore how the December 2015 bilateral agreements between South Korea and Japan render the former comfort woman collateral damage again. Let's welcome her.
Thank you for inviting me to this very important, very well organized, with all the exhibits surrounding us and just incredible speakers in attendance. And thank you for that introduction. When I gave my topic to Dr. Lee, I didn't realize I would be preceded by the specialist on the term collateral damage. So it's my tough luck, so how I'm going to proceed tonight. Well, anyway, I thought about this conference in terms of the theme of the exhibit, collateral damage, and how comfort woman became collateral damage yet again due to the signing of the two-party agreement on December 28, 2015. And the reason I thought about many times is this. And the broader big stroke factor is the geopolitical situation in East Asia. Historically, the Korean Peninsula, not just South Korea or North Korea separately, Korean Peninsula has always suffered because of its vulnerable geopolitical situation. Oftentimes, Korea was a victim of strong powers surrounding it, huge China and Russia to the west and north of it, and then a very ambitious Japan east of it. So oftentimes Korea became a victim and the bone of contention for this power struggle among these powerful countries. There was an ambassador of South Korea to the United States who often came to Georgetown to speak when I was managing Korean Studies program at Georgetown. He often began his talk like this. Ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't know, Korea is in a bad neighborhood. Korea is a really, really bad neighborhood. I think that December 28, 2015 agreement was signed in consideration of this geopolitical situation. United States as a Pacific power is compelled to counter the looming threat from the rise of China. And South Korea and Japan are under pressure to set aside their disagreements and forge strong ties to follow the American lead. And whether it was really covert or overt or just subtle or not, both South Korea and Japan were under pressure to come to erase past disagreements and come to some kind of agreement. The result was December 28, 2015 agreement. And this agreement is supposed to be, according to Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida and South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Bong-se, is that both sides reached the final and irreversible deal on the comfort woman issues. So, I'd like to talk a little bit about that. It has been largely heralded by numerous experts as an example of successful diplomacy. The U.S. government immediately came out with a statement and applauded it as the end of the long-standing dispute between South Korea and Japan. which U.S. State Department said two of the most important U.S. allies in the East Asia. And it was extolled because Japan offered apologies, offered money. At the same time, South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Bong-se also promised to set aside, to put the whole matter to rest, and agreed to find an amicable solution concerning the removal of a Councilwoman statue in front of the Japanese embassy in Seoul. So if you think about this, if you do not know the details of Councilwoman issues, some of us have been dealing with this for 24 years. I've been involved in this since 1992 when the Washington Coalition for Councilwoman was first established in the basement of a church in McLean in the suburb of Washington, D.C. Then you would think, oh, that's wonderful. Japan apologized, offered $9 million and for the welfare and benefit of the surviving countrywomen. I want you to think just a little bit about the behind this really and the in-between lines of this agreement. So because of this, many in South Korean civil society, along with the surviving councilwoman, view the agreement as another cover-up of the wrongdoing of the Japanese Imperial Army. Why? Because, as I said, fundamentally, in the big stroke, it was not out of the sincere, contrite spirit on the part of Japan, but it came to the agreement because of geopolitical situation. And also because when you look at specifics of the agreement, it totally ignored all the demands and the demands of the victims. I can quickly go through 6 of them. There's no real formal acceptance of the state responsibility, no official apology. There's an apology, again, but it's a personal apology of Prime Minister Abe through the person of Foreign Minister. And there's no legal compensation. The money is considered consolation money, not legal compensation, because they don't want to take the legal responsibility. And no promise of full investigation, whether it had really taken place under the auspices of the Japanese military, under the command of the imperial military. And no promise of ongoing education about this. Textbooks in Japan are going backward. They're taking out any account of this matter from the textbooks. And Japanese citizens in this country and overseas are interfering with Korean foreign nationals or the supporters of the countrywoman to erect memorials. For example, in Chicago, we have statues all set to go on. But because of the interference and pressure of the Japanese military, the business interests in the local area approaching the local governments, we are still stalled. So because of these things, I do not think that that agreement of December 2015 really solved anything. But also another thing is that final and irrevocable, irreversible, okay? If these things are not solved, how can you call that final and irreversible? And let's also, I want to go with four items, why I'm saying this. I've already mentioned that none of the victims' demands have been met. And I'm going to next deal with the nature of the apology. As I mentioned, it was personal, not official, and it really is not any more significant than 1983 Japan's cabinet secretary offered. And nothing more than that, no, absolutely no change. The money, $9 million in US dollars, seems a lot when you first hear about it. But think about how long comfort system has been in place. 1931 to 1945, the so-called 15-year war period in Japan. So I will leave it up to you whether $9 million with anywhere up to 200,000, and recently with the appearance of the book of Professor Pepe Chu of Vassar College, that included Chinese comfort women, number now is increased up to 400,000. Okay, if you think that money is enough, I will leave it to your comment. And then think about the compromise. In here, I'm going to talk about Japanese pressure for South Korean government to remove the statue in front of the Japanese embassy, which had been the focal point of Wednesday noon demonstration since January 8th of 1992. So over 2,000 demonstrations have taken place. Rain or shine, heat or cold, and obviously this has been a really nuisance for Japanese government and has been pressuring. But Korea is the victim country. South Korean government sort of agreed to think about it, and Japan is the perpetrator country. Whether that's right or not, I will leave that once again up to you. So, I'm supposed to.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much for your
Okay.
wonderful talk. I think we're going to go over time if you, unless you have some concluding remarks.
Yeah, and I like to conclude, because of this agreement, South Korean society is divided. Obviously the government and the people in the establishment are saying to some of us, supporters of the comfort women and the civil society activists, I say, haven't you done enough? Aren't you tired yourself? Okay, so there is a big divide there. And then in terms of implementation of this agreement and what to do with the money and all these things, South Korean government established a private foundation to disperse this money. So once again, it's unofficial, secondhand, obviously. And then in the spring of this year, there was an election, National Assembly election took place, and the government of President Park Geun-hye lost. So any kind of real successful implementation of this agreement is very much in doubt. So that makes this agreement, it sort of almost invites renegotiation. And then the main opposition, Minju Party, suggested that South Korea need to renegotiate the agreement. And then the Lawyers for a Democratic Society, this is an NGO that's called the Minbyun, the Society of Lawyers for Civil Society, submitted a petition to the United Nations asking to the international body to confirm whether the South Korean-Japan agreement meets international human rights standards. So the public sentiment in South Korea is clearly not in favor of present agreement. So final and irreversible is really obviously not very possible. Another thing that was included in the December agreement was not to discuss this matter in public forum like the United Nations, but within 3 months, Japanese Prime Minister himself mentioned that the comfort woman system was not anything official. It was, the repeat of the previous positions. So it's not final, it's not irreversible, it's not discussable in the public, but it was already violated. So, in another conclusion that I can reading this agreement very closely is that this agreement ended up being one that South Korea, the victim country, gave up more than Japan had given up. And in my mind, there is no doubt that this agreement needs to be renegotiated. And for when that time, if and when that comes, South Korea needs to be more self-assuring and confident and play a partner in terms of geopolitical position between China and Japan, not leaning to any one direction in any with greater favor, but be a more balanced, you might say, a negotiator and diplomat than we had so far shown capable of doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Banyo. She has a lot to say. Actually, the reconciliation really takes a time. Maybe it takes forever, as it cannot be done with one piece of paper. Our third speaker is Professor Laura Bavaran, so Rhinarius, and she will explore the ethics and aesthetics of representing sexual violence through language. And her analysis rests on the premise that literature and even art can offer a powerful medium to deconstruct and reinterpret history beyond official narratives. Let's welcome her.
Thank you. First, I wanted to thank so much Julie and Talia for inviting me, and I'm honored to be among these wonderful speakers. I've been a big fan of Bonnie's work for a long time. So I am a literature professor, and I'm interested in the way writers can represent this. We have here artists among us today, and I was always intrigued by the difficulty of representing sexual violence through either visual means or through words. So this is what I'm going to be looking at, and I'm going to be looking at 3 novels by Korean American authors who have dealt with the comfort women issues. So from a literary standpoint, the danger of turning trauma endured by a rape victim into an erotic spectacle or an aestheticized allure to be admired from a safe distance poses a challenge to the artist. In her essay on style, Susan Sontag accurately notes that in the strictest sense, all contents of consciousness are indescribable. Stylistic devices, Sontag continues, are also techniques of avoidance. The most potent elements in a work of art are often its silences. Admittedly, one of the major aesthetic difficulties of representing sex-trafficked characters concerns, in Sontag's own words, the ethics of seeing. In this case, how to avoid deploying exploitative images of sexual violence that further objectify the person and turn his or her experience into an erotic performance for readers who watch from a safe distance. Like in mainstream media, fictional representations of sex trafficking tend to rely on disempowering, voyeuristic, often pornographic images of trafficked victims. Describing sexual violence thus presents a problem for the artist who wants to put trauma into words without showcasing it as yet another performance for the voyeur, while the writer's focus can compromise the book's reception depending on the way the narrative is constructed. Aestheticizing a rape scene, for example, can dilute the tenor of the aggression without necessarily disquieting readers. While graphically showcasing barbaric torture of a hapless victim would likely repel most audiences, or worse, depending on whose point of view you show, a writer may perhaps unintentionally showcase titillating scenes that would violate that survivor, again, this time in writing, another form of what Bonnie was saying, collateral damage again. Bearing these constraints in mind, I want to look at the way in which authors deal stylistically with the violated female body in order to avoid delving into erotica or voyeurism, how they create art from rape, how they resist glamorizing it in a way reminiscent of W.B. Yeats's Lay Down the Swan, and how they approach the difficulty, even futility perhaps, of representing sexual violence. Because of the theme of this symposium, I will refer to 3 Korean-American writers who have attempted to represent the comfort women's ordeals. Since our time is limited, I will only concentrate here on how these authors represent sexual violence, although there is so much more to be said about these novels. I will start with Clarice Park's first novel, A Gift of the Emperor. And Bonnie was telling me that she met the author. Here, Park unravels the odyssey of a comfort woman as it evolves, from abduction by the military to the enslavement and multiple rapes at the comfort stations, following the characteristic intimacy of a memoir. Coincided with the recent popularity of the memoir as a human rights genre, Park's first-person fictional account reads almost like one. When Park represents the rape of her main character, the 17-year-old Soon Ha, she does so as a brutal abuse of male power from the victim's point of view, while the majority of the violent scenes she describes tend to rely on what trauma survivors have identified as coping mechanisms, namely out-of-body experiences of detachment, complete surrender as a method of self-preservation, or numbing of the senses. In order to avoid creating a spectacle of the sexual violence Soon Ha endures, Park includes only a few passages of showing Soon Ha's rape, but the audience is led to assume that the violations occur multiple times. When readers do witness sexual violence, the author showcases the event as experienced from the victim's perception and not the rapist or a third party. And I quote an example. He tore my tunic with both hands and pushed me on the bed. I didn't fight. I lay there. He was the conqueror, I the conquered. My fate had been decided 33 years ago, even before I was born, when the Japanese took over our Yi dynasty. The captain jumped on top of me, spreading the smell of alcohol all over me. I tried to listen to the sound of waves. It seemed the sea was shouting in protest. The wind cried sharply, scratching the window. Finally, I heard a huge splash on the side of the ship, and I wished a hurricane would come. In the scene just described, the author intertwines colonialism and rape as the captain becomes a synecdoche for the Japanese empire, soon half of the Korean nation. Yet the focus is Soon Ha's painful experience, though apparently detached, mediated through an environment that shouts, the sea, cries sharply and scratches, the wind, and finally destroys, the hurricane. Suggesting the limitations of language to convey the corporeality of pain, as Eileen Scarry would argue, the narrative often resorts to overpowering images of nature and disengages the girl from the rapes she is experiencing. When Soon Ha later attempts to get some redress by denouncing the rapes to a superior, she finds it difficult to repel the sexual violence she suffered, and I quote, "Last night, sir, an unknown number of soldiers came into our cabin and did unspeakable things to us." "What unspeakable things?" the captain asked, while avoiding my eyes. "The unspeakable things, sir. The same things that the imperial soldiers did to the Chinese women when they invaded Nanking." The officer suddenly roared with laughter. "Oh, unspeakable things." And here we can think of Jim Fowler's Unspeakable too, if you haven't had a chance to have a look at it. So from a psychological perspective, the unspeakable things Soon Ha mentions reflect a common behavior. Indeed, trauma exceeds language. Trauma cannot be spoken. It belongs in the realm of the repressed. And rape victims often cannot verbalize the situation because of the intensity triggered by the stressor, well, they tend to block the traumatic event from their consciousness. I'm going to skip to the next novel because the author introduces a love interest that saves her from basically the torture. But Nora Oxshire-Keller's Comfort Woman, this is the second novel, goes a step further by making her main character, Akiko Sunhayo, the recipient of some of the worst violence. Keller mainly explores the relationship between Akiko, a comfort woman survivor who remains traumatized for the rest of her life, and her daughter. When the author faces the challenge of representing Akiko's first rape, like part before, she does not showcase female body parts for readers to see, but resorts instead to realistic tropes of torture and pain from Akiko's point of view. And I quote, "Even though I had not yet had my first bleeding, I was auctioned off to the highest bidder. After that, it was free for all, and I thought I would never stop bleeding." By the free-for-all circumlocution, the narrative deliberately conceives the image of explicitly gruesome sexual violence that must have taken place, and also the youth, right? She wasn't even bleeding. Yet Keller's reference to the wounds that never stop bleeding prevent the reader from denying or avoiding effective contact with the torture that just happened. By focusing the experience to a first-person narrator and not spectators, the soldiers, for example, Keller averts an exploitative gaze into the violated female body, or even an aestheticized image that would dilute the tenor of the aggression. Other literary techniques, such as magic realism, for example, render more problematic representations. One can compare this passage to Gabriel Garcia Marquez's Innocent Querendira, where the Colombian writer crafts a visually exuberant and aesthetically beautiful, albeit occasionally shocking, sex trafficking story. Garcia Marquez's description of the 14-year-old Querendira's first rape, for example, despite making it clear in the narrative that this is a violation, showcases a fantastic pictorial scene, and I quote, "The girl shouted in silence, but he, the rapist, replied with a solemn slap, which lifted her off the ground and suspended her in the air for an instant with her long Medusa hair floating in space." That the girl shouts in silence, together with the captivating image of her serpent-like hair floating for seconds, detracts readers from the violence that suspended her in the air in the first place, and more significantly, of the rape that follows. As Elizabeth Anker suggests, stylistic techniques such as magic realism tend to divert attention from depictions of abuses of human rights. This style distances one from the horrors it describes, making the description of them not only bearable but even enjoyable. In so doing, a writer may risk muting the affective fiber of the character's encounter with suffering and loss. Finally, I want to look at Chan Rei Lee's A Gesture Life, which addresses the comforting ordeals through the eyes of the Korean-Japanese medical officer, Dr. Hata. Lee's narrative choice, a third-person male gaze, could potentially offer some problematic representations, as in Chris Abani or Abigail Sanusi's sex trafficking novels, for example. Yet Lee's novel generally resists graphic representations of sexual violence, echoing Dr. Hata's own repression of the violence he witnessed. As Alexis Morris explained, the fragmented atemporal narrative creates a novel in which much of what is written remains unwritten, communicated remains unwritten, moving instead into a narrative structure that mirrors the symptoms of the traumatized psyche and challenges readers to bear witness. The first encounter Lee's male character has with the comfort woman, which is revealed only after 100 or so pages, becomes, in Julia Cristella's words, abjection itself. And I'll quote a passage. "As we approached the clubhouse, we saw a crowd of soldiers. 'Move back, don't touch anything. I'm a medical officer,' I heard Fujimori say. 'Who saw what happened? Speak up.' The men stood silent except for Fujimori, who was kneeling by a girl. Enchi and I were standing beside him. The girl was naked, and the skin on her body looked smooth and perfect, except that her head was crooked too far upward. It was obvious her neck was cleanly broken. She was quite dead. The girl was the first dead person I had ever seen. She was neither homely nor pretty. She was just a girl, otherwise unremarkable, perhaps 15 or so. I kept thinking she looked to be Korean with her broad square face. And the girl had just committed suicide by jumping off the window of a recreation house. Lee's decision to show the aftermath of the violence here and not an alive character experiencing sexual torture is important. On the one hand, it emphasizes the women's disposability commodity status, and on the other, it solves a major problem of aesthetic representation. In Eileen Scarry's term, the impossibility to capture in language the corporeality of pain and physical violence. As Julia Kristeva observes in Powers of Horror, the corpse upsets even more violently the one who confronts it as a fragile chance. The corpse, the most sickening of ways, is a border that has encroached upon everything. Seen without God and with an outside science, it is the outmost of abjection. By showing a corpse stressing no other physical markers than her neck and her Korean look, the narrative implies that presumably the Korean victim had been placed in an abhorrent position and that her only way out was to kill herself. For readers, it would be impossible to deny this violence. Later, when Dr. Hannah starts treating the comfort women whom he initially assumes to be volunteers, he notes, and I quote, that the first girl could hardly walk and was bleeding freely from her genital area, which was bruised and swollen nearly beyond recognition. The girl had no other injuries per se, though she hardly responded when spoken to. Her eyes were lightless and nearly fixed. By having the male character speak in detached medical register, letting only readers see lacerations, injuries, and a state of shock, the author again forces his audience to acknowledge the presence of what must have been brutal violations. In this way, neither the male character nor readers are allowed to comfortably consume this violated female body.
Thank you so much. Such a wonderful examinations, and it is really truthful that there is a difficulties of artistic expressions of the sexual violence, with the ethics, and at the same time with truthful actuality. Our last speaker is Professor Tomomi Imoto, and she explores the ways in which the comfort women issues stands parallel to Chushumi Island Festival. Both of them concerns of historicizing the past through performance. They counter resistance and obstacle that is the nationalist narrative of the past. Let's welcome her.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Julie in Korea and Washington Coalition for Comfort Women Issue for organizing such a wonderful panel and inviting me. So I'm engaged in ethnographic research in Tsushima Island in Japan. Tsushima Island is located right between Korea and Japan.
Excuse me, can you speak up a little more, please?
Yeah.
So Tsushima Island is located between Korean Peninsula and Japan. It's right in the middle between the two nations. And I investigate the summer festival, which creates new voice in nationalist history in Japan. So today I try to talk about how comfort women issue and this Tsushima festival have some similarities, structural similarities in creating voice in history. So during pre-modern history, pre-modern period, Japanese shogun and Korean king exchanged communication on board. The more than two centuries, they had peaceful relationship. So Tsushima Island started celebrate this history. And 40 years ago, it started a quiet communal event, but then today, it's just huge international event, attracting lots of media and tourists. So their relationship between Korea and Japan, their relationship was based on Confucian ideology. It's a peaceful relationship, amicable relationship between Japan and Korea, based on Confucian ideology of sincerity, respect, neighborly relationship, equal relationship between Korea and Japan. However, this history was silenced by modern nationalist ideology. So when Tsushima Islanders started to celebrate this history by commemorating envoy exchanges, people were surprised. Many Japanese started to pay attention because it's fascinating. Nobody knew about this history. And over time, it will become an international event. So I want to compare two events, this festival and comfort women. And I want to suggest three structural similarities between those two events. First similarity is that both of them concern historicization of the past through performance. They try to create history, which is historical event, which did not exist in nationalist narrative, through performance. The important thing is narrative. Their voice came from the periphery of the state. They didn't exist in the center, nationalist discourse of the past. They came from periphery. And second, it was expressed through performance, through speaking up, demonstrating, creating statues. So there is a communicative lens between the speaker, performer, and also the recipient, which is the audience, mostly Japanese and Korean audience. So there's a message that they wanted to create, they wanted to be heard, and then there's a recipient and speaker. So this is very important sort of narrative. So this leads to the second structural similarity, that both of them encounter resistance and obstacles, which is nationalist narrative. It's nationalist narrative. Mostly people who cling to nationalist ideology beliefs in hierarchy. It's a colonialist ideology of Japan and Korea and other East Asian countries. So there are some supporters. There are actually lots of supporters who want to accept the message, but there are also a lot of recipients of the message who want to refuse to accept such an important discourse in history. So during my ethnographic field work in Tsushima, I also encountered many Tsushima locals who resent their local performance because they didn't want to celebrate the Korean history, Korean-Japanese history. Especially if they celebrate, they reenact Korean handball, so they have to also perform the Korean handball. And many islanders also resented that they have to celebrate Korean handball, which is mostly Confucian literature of Japan. So, as you know, there are many also Japanese government and also many nationalists who want to deny handball women as a historical form. So structural similarity here is that there are always people who try to deny it based on the ideology which was created before this historical narrative coming out. So again, about the message, the audience, we also have supporters. So there are some similarity, some structural similarity in which there are many, majority of the Japanese who accept the message, who want to support the new voice in the history. So I would call this environment for those who support the message, this environment, this background as colonialist, post-colonial world, post-colonial Japan or post-colonial world. So usually post-colonial world we define as the world, the environment, which is different from the modern world. colonial world. So in post-colonial world, people are curious. People want to embrace cultural differences. People want to embrace cultural others. So when I was doing field work in Tsushima, there are many tourists, many outsiders, both Korean and Japan. From Korea and Japan, they wanted to embrace this novel history. They wanted to embrace this link between Korea and Japan, which was peaceful, which was amicable, which was equal. Those are opposite to Japanese nationalist ideology. So many Japanese Koreans who celebrated this new history were actually the supporters in post-colonial audience. For example, related to comfort women issues, in 1990s, we started to see lots of transnational movements. So those supports came from us, from outside Japan. UN agencies also play real active role. As you know, the United Nations also in 1990s declared the rights of indigenous people. So we started to see this environment where people started celebrating and embrace cultural differences. So same thing was happening in Tsushima Island. Many people wanted to celebrate this amicable history that they didn't know until they came to Tsushima and witnessed this performance. So there are three structural similarities that I found common between two events, and they look very different on the surface. Those two events have nothing to do with each other on the surface, but after they came from same structural background, they tried to create a voice that was not there in the nationalist history, and they tried to add in some new episode in the nationalist history. So I hope when we concern comfort women issues, it's a human rights issue, very different from Tsushima's festival. However, we try to do the same thing, try to add in some new facts to the history. And whenever we do that, we actually face the support and obstacles because of this structural similarity and the currency of the history. We actually find some similarity in this sector.
Thank you so much. Thank you. The talks by these four speakers has exceeded our expected time, so we don't have much time to discuss and receive the questions. But if you have any questions, please raise your hand, and then Marina will, circle around the mics, and so you can post some questions.
What up?
Yes. Why are you thinking the questions? And let me start with the one question to Laura about actually she has a much longer paper that she's brought into. She was really happy to read her papers, and which is wonderfully written about these three novels. And all different perspectives from, the different kind of perspective as a protagonist or as a third party. And you mentioned about the Kristeva abstractions, which is kind of a very current, cutting-edge concept of abstract, and how could you explain a little bit about how these apply these concepts of abstract to this novel that you mentioned?
Yeah, sure. So I started looking at novels that deal with sex trafficking, and I realized that the topic of sexual violence can easily go wrong, especially by reading a lot of bad books. I saw that many times the more descriptive the writer was, this was especially, I noticed in books that, for example, like many human rights workers and social workers were trying to raise awareness, for example, with the issue of children trafficked for sex. And when you look at the descriptions, it was really tropes of pornography. And I don't say this as a value judgment or any like, that's another genre, erotic is another genre. But that's why I was interested in the ethics of how you represent that. And we have artists here, and I can imagine that you also have probably the same question, like how do I represent this ethically and empathetically? And there are, with language, what we have here is that we're dealing with trauma. And trauma exceeds language. Trauma is that which cannot be put into words. So that in itself, if you're going to write about it, that's the challenge. And then the second challenge is that this is not just physical violence, there's the element of sexual violence, which opens a whole different kind of war. So the more descriptive the writer gets, the more it could end up, collateral damage again, the more you could end up violating that victim again. So I thought in particular in Chan Ray, to respond to your question, that was a long introduction, Chan Ray Lee's novel, I thought it was so brilliant what he did, because the first time he encounters the comfort woman, which is obviously a very young girl, it's a corpse. So it's a male character, but what he sees, it's a corpse. And it immediately brought me to Kristeva and the notion of the objection, and this comes from psychoanalysis. But Kristeva would say that the object is this very violent, visceral, primal reaction we have when we encounter, she talks a lot about corpses, is the border, the limit between subject and object, right? So it's when we physical body encounter a corpse, it reminds us of our own materiality and our own mortality. And that triggers a reaction that Kristeva would say it's outside, meaning, and then I could talk about Lacan, the real, and it gets more complicated. But it's basically, to make it easy, it's something we cannot deal with. It's something so abhorrent that we deal with it in the realm of the repressed. So I thought that by introducing that, the corpse, Lee is pushing us to that area of what we cannot deal with. There's so much more without really describing what was going on inside those conflict stations in great detail.
Thank you so much. Actually, when you Google the comfort woman, and you might be amazed by the number of the video clips and the films and the novels and anything. So many things actually, as you said, the lack of ethics, and it's very pornographic or very low directed. So I really wanted to read the novels that I didn't read yet, the last one. Okay, there is a question, and could you pass the mic to them? You can point to the specific speaker, or you can just point to the general.
This is to the whole panel and the artists in the audience. Is there any particular body of artistic or written work or dance or music that the comfort women left behind? I know there are very few left living, but I suspect that they had their own creative impulses, and I've never encountered any of their work being spotlighted, so I would like to know about that.
Yeah, answer to that question. Yeah, actually, everybody said about the trauma, which is so deep and so profound, and maybe it's hard to heal. But there is some kind of houses, we call it a sharing house, house of sharing, where all the survivors got together, they live together, and there's a certain program. So one of the programs is a healing process, like art, they learn art, the art therapy, or music therapy, or gardening therapy. There's so many therapies, and I've heard that it's not that much effective as we think of it, but some of them is really has some artistic talent. So they painted, they created some artistic works. Actually, I had organized an exhibition in Washington D.C. of their own work, and I wrote the articles in the Washington Times about the future directions of comfort women, and then I inserted their work. Actually, I have to have this article where I wrote. These work is actually drawn by, victims, and there's a lot of them.
I'd actually add, There is also, in addition to the victims' artwork themselves, and it came out in a kind of coffee table size book published in Korea that Dr. Liu is referring to. And there's also a art book by Japanese artists of my generation. Her name is Tomiyama Taeko. And that has really very eerie pictures, sort of, you might say, kind of art noir type of artwork. And some of the things like Deep in the Sea has skeletons and Japanese insignia for military, both Navy and Army, at the bottom of the sea, and it says, the voice of the victims, that kind of thing. And so her career is really unique. She grew up in Korea until 1945 came, and she returned to Japan. And so she has really, really particular empathy for Korean people. And I would strongly suggest that you go into that and type Tomiyama Taeko. Tomi, it reads, spells exactly as I am saying, Tomiyama Taeko, and her artwork will pop up. So, could you spell it? She's an artist.
Spell it.
Spell it. You can spell it.
Spelled Tomiyama. That's her family name. Her first name is Taeko. Another Taeko. Tomiyama Taeko. It's a well-known artwork dealing with this colonialism, imperialism, and compromising issues, and sexual against violence, and violence in general during the war period.
She has another question. Yeah, give this question.
Can you please use the microphone?
My name is Christine Choi. I'm board chair of Washington Coalition for Comfort Issues. I really appreciate your support and attendance tonight. My question is really for me, Professor, you can answer, or anybody. Japanese Prime Minister Abe tried to revise the history of comfortable issues, and sometimes he was talking about textbook definition of comfortable issues. And what do you think about it? And is it fair for you to do a revision of history in comfortable issues, a definition of the textbooks in comfortable?
No, she should use that one to create feedback. Just wait until the sirens go.
In Japan, history textbook have to go through examination and have to pass by Ministry of Education. And one time, comfortable issue became very important, and almost all the textbooks listed the issue of the historical event. And Japanese children learn this history. But then, it's called School Guide, which was created by nationalist intellectuals and politicians. They created a new textbook. We are called a new textbook, School Guide. So they created history according to nationalist idea of the past. And this textbook was not employed by most of the schools, but some schools employed and adopted this textbook, and they teach kids using this textbook. So because of this issue, Japanese started to have a conversation about the past, especially conflict issue. And the majority of Japanese really wants to know what happened. However, the voice from the nationalist leaders and also some of the intellectuals, including professors in the history department at Tokyo University, were against it. So now it becomes very important issue. And I don't know if I should speak up for my own opinion. But I just want to emphasize that the majority of Japanese really wants to learn everything that happened. And majority of Japanese were against this nationalist view, which tried to create a new sort of history, which is against the currency of the majority of people.
Yeah, I believe there are so many Japanese scholars and historians and support and help us to archive and find the important materials. Their contributions are huge. And then, going back to the previous questions, and actually the work drawn or painted by the Kanpo women were traveling exhibition in Japan. There's so many Japanese, especially the women and children, they were never exposed to these issues. And they were so impressed and they were so compassionate. And then they wrote letters and they sent to the Kanpo women. And so many letters poured into the Kanpo women, and these letters are compiled as a book. I mean, this is one very important examples of, kind of the reconciliation, process of reconciliation. And then the artwork, like these artwork or whatever the written or the visual, mobile, any kind of artistic form is so important. The Wartime Atrocity, the arts that I like in this famous work, artwork is not telling the truth, but the making the truth felt. That's the power of the arts. Another question? Yes. Yeah.
First of all, I just want to let her know because based on the one of the painting was impressed by the movie director. He made a movie called Spring Homecoming, just to show in New York City. And we have a chance and we can go and Google, or I could give you information.
Spring homecoming?
Spring Homecoming.
Thank you.
It's, I will let you know how you can see that movie. Besides that, Professor O, really appreciate and really clarify because a lot of the Western, not Korean, some of Korean also they have information. Because some of them is like, they have enough apologize. That's not true. So you really spread out what they didn't do, what they did, what we want. And especially the Harmony, they not happy about this negotiation or whatever. Oh no, I felt like it's an unofficial, just 2015. So you really summarize, and I wish you can make some kind of publication so everybody aware about what has not done, so what Harmony really wants to hear about them. But so we have to kind of educate everybody about that one. So I really appreciate you doing it today. But my real question is here today. There are few women actually from Netherlands, and they were Kanpo women, and they went to international court, and they got compensation from the Japanese government, which what I heard. Am I right? So, what about the rest of the Kanpo women? Only few Harlem women who could get a compensation? What about the rest of the people? Why is international court of the
Where was that?
I'm just asking you guys, because that's what I heard in the IBC. There was a few Kanpo women from the Harlem, and she was in Australia. I feel like she got the compensation from international court. I'm asking you that.
Yeah.
Put the microphone close to you.
Yeah, the thing, I don't know what kind of conversation that they may have with officers of the International Criminal Court, but one thing I can tell you is, unfortunately, of whatever you want, however you want to characterize it, the International Criminal Court does not have jurisdiction over and cannot have jurisdiction over the plight of the Korean, the comfort women, because the International Criminal Court can only deal with cases that happened after its statute came into force, which is July 1st, 2002.
I'm sorry, what was the reason?
Yeah, I say I'm not sure what you might be referring to with about conversations of comfort
Well,
women.
this would be both international court, so.
You mean the International Criminal Court?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
But what about the rest of the Japanese and Korean Roman? They cannot go to the international criminal court like that one?
Yeah, no, they cannot, anything, the International Criminal Court can only deal with cases, can only have jurisdiction on cases that occurred after it came into being. Its statute was approved July 1st, 2002. That's what I'm saying.
As far as I know, there are so many trials filed to the court, not just International Criminal Court, but very recently, for example, 2015, the Korean lawyer came over here and they filed these issues. He filed not for the Japanese government, but any industry, any manufacturer who involved in this trafficking, like the shipping companies and anything like that. I don't know if you heard of it. But any filing in the lawsuit wasn't successful so far. The jurisdiction issues involved the first thing, and then there's another one, the expiration of the, what is it called, the specific terms of expirations of the, what is it called?
Our statute of limitations.
Right, yeah. And I've never heard of a successful, the winning in bid.
So how many years is the case?
No, here we get here. First of all, the idea is that for situations like crimes against humanity, egregious war crimes, and genocide, the position, let's say, of international organizations like the UN, these should not be subjected to statute of limitations. Now, of course, different jurisdictions, national jurisdictions, deal differently with these issues. Why? Because you have the domestic dynamics in some situations where you had atrocities happening. In order to reach some kind of a negotiated settlement, you have had amnesty laws. And for example, in some countries, you have situations in which you say you have amnesty laws, which means you forget the past and you just do a truth and reconciliation commission and you try to move forward. Now, how valid these are in international law is a big debate, because you can agree something domestically, but still you can have some kind of a forum, an international forum, which may still hold you accountable for things for atrocities that you have committed, or let's say another domestic court in another country that will operate under the principle of universal jurisdiction. That's, for example, what happened to Pinochet when he found himself in England, when there was an arrest warrant issued by a Spanish judge for atrocities that were committed while he was in charge in Chile, and then he got into legal trouble in England. In the end, of course, he was not sent to Spain to be prosecuted for violations of the Torture Convention. He was sent back home, but he was sent back home for medical reasons. So the precedent does stand that you can be held accountable. So there are other ways that you can hold accountable, but the International Criminal Court, for the things we're discussing, unfortunately, is not a forum for this, because it only has jurisdiction for things that happen after July 1st, 2002. Good. Thank you very good. Can I say something on the, although there's a little the previous question about Japan that you asked, its history. Now we don't want to start a big discussion on this, but Japan does have a problem in coping with its past. And it's kind of fascinating if you put it in the comparative context between Japan and Germany, and how they have dealt with its historical memory and the trauma and things like that. Now, we can, we can still argue whether Germany, for example, has gone as far as it could to coping with the past. But there is no comparison, I would argue, between how Germany, the inroads that Germany has done, and the inroads, or very limited inroads, that Japan has had. And it is not just the issue of the comfort women, it is also the issue of the Nanjing massacre and the atrocities. Recently was in the news that the Japanese government withdrew its support, would not give money to UNESCO this year, because UNESCO accepted the registration of certain documents that were provided by the Chinese government concerning the Nanjing massacre. So it is kind of, and you have, of course, a top Japanese official routinely visiting the memorial where war criminals are being buried. I mean, can somebody imagine Merkel doing the same in Germany? That would be inconceivable. So there is a problem there that demonstrates a much bigger problem, and we can argue and things like that, why this is happening and why this is happening, and who exactly is responsible, how much is the blame of the leadership, how much is the society at large or whatever. But when you put them next to each other, it is beyond, goes beyond the history books. Is how you look at the war criminals of the Second World War, how you look at the Nanjing massacres. There is a pattern of problematic encounters of historical memory there.
George, could you say that the Turkish writing out of the books of the Asia Minor incident
Oh, yeah, that's another.
by
That's
a
another.
nationalist government is related
Yeah.
to this?
And the whole debate to what extent Armenian massacres were a genocide or not.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, there is a problem. There's no doubt.
Maybe one last question.
I have a comment. With George's, actually comparing Japan and Germany on the World War II, the behaviors of each country, there is a very, very interesting book. It's already many years old, a couple decades old actually, by Ian Baruma. He is an international journalist.
B-U-R-U-M-A.
Baruma, B-A-R-U-M-A. The title of the book is called The Wages of Guilt. It compares how Germany was able to deal with it and Japan was not. He explains it, although he is saying it's not excusable, he tries to explain in the cultural context and a kind of Christian culture of guilt and seeking for redemption, and Confucian culture of Japan, the idea of shame, that if the external parties do not know about it, there's no shame exists. You kind of cover your face and your shame will not be there. So this is a very crude explanation summary of it, but I would highly recommend for you to read if you want to understand why Japan has dragged on this long, unable to deal with it. That happened over 70 years ago. I would recommend it. Wages of Guilt by Ian Baruma. I think he's currently a professor at God College.
So one last question. If you don't have any questions, maybe
I have one question. This doesn't
It works.
it works. It works. Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Somebody must have turned it off.
Turn it on.
There's another one over
Does it
here.
work?
Yeah, that's what.
Actually, these days, I got some questions people ask. They are tired of hearing comfortable issues. But actually, it's been our Washington Coalition for Comfortable Issues established 1992, when the first comfortable come out and speak up. Before, in Korean culture, virginity or something is very important, you don't talk about it. When you get, raped or something, you keep it secret, and family really dishonor those girls. This verse was abducted and enforced sex slavery. But anyway, it's still unresolved and still current issue. In spite of that, people are tired of hearing about it. So I have a question to Dr. Lee, President of the Washington Coalition. What is your future direction or something to go through?
So it leads to the eloquent teacher. First of all, as I said, we are like a 25th anniversary next year. So we've been involved in this grassroots movement to pass House Resolution 121 at the Congress. We're working with the Congresses and elected officers last 25 years. We arranged 700 people demonstration in front of the Congress, and all this activism, in addition to the activism, as I said, I don't want to make these issues a political piece. I don't want it to politicize. I don't want it to do like Japan and Korean issues, but a little bit broaden for the human rights and women's rights and something like wartime atrocity and global issues and literary issues. So I don't want to look at issues through the only one pinhole, right? And I want to this one is a multi-diverse perspective to understand and to solve these issues. And whether it is academic like this or whether it is educational, we developed so many academic programs, and actually she's a teaching at the Holocaust Center at the Queen's Community College, and they have a wonderful program have developed. We don't have any blame to them, but she's doing a wonderful job over there. And educational, academic, or artistic, or any kind of diverse issues, a feminist perspective, and so many issues. And I just wanted to people speak about this. And then this is seems like a very subtle, maybe indirect, like a drop of water. But that drops of water can be pouring, rolling river, and then so that people can be understand and educated by these issues. And before all these women pass away, we have only 40 survivors in Korea. Of course, there's a lot more other countries, 400,000, the recent documents. But before they passed away, I just wanted to see some kind of progress. Thank you so much for coming today. One last talk, I really want to appreciate the John J. Conjure Criminal Justice, and especially the Talia, Professor Talia. We could have this one without her. All these four speakers, give them a big round of applause for these four speakers. And also our chairman of board of directors, so she's a very supportive, and she, sponsor of this exhibition and then the symposium, and she's a very active role to persuade her other board members. So give a big round.
One question. You mentioned HR 121. Can you tell us what it is and how we can lobby for it?
Oh, yeah, that was start with Lane Evans, Congressman Lane Evans, and the Lane Evans had he caught the Parkinson's disease, so he couldn't continue to do it. We had a hearing. We invited the victims at the Congress, and then a lot of hearing and signing, and so many institutions were involved, not just from the CCW. And then it just turning over to the Michael Honda, Congress Michael Honda, so he could succeed to pass this resolution, House resolution at the Congress of 2007. 2007, in which the United States Congress clearly declared that Japanese government should acknowledge and apologize to these victims. The Japanese government should acknowledge and then apologize and then give some relevant, appropriate reparation, the legal reparation to these victims. So it's been a attempt believe it or not, the next year is a decade, a 10th anniversary of HR 121. So celebrating what we passed it doesn't really mean a lot to us, you know.
But is there a way to get it to the Senate? Is there a way to push it forward? Should there be?
It's already passed.
House resolution?
Oh, it did?
Yeah, 2007, yeah, 2007.
Oh, okay.
If you Googling HR 121, and then you can see the whole passage, whole draft over there. Yes. Why don't we proceed? Oh, did I recognize everybody? Marina is assistant who's taking photographs also. She's did a wonderful job also. And why don't we give her a big round of applause, Marina?